Wrong place, wrong skin, Vance Mercer said. And the championship ring kissed Devin Taylor's forehead with a contemptuous flick. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut the air. 500 spectators went still, the kind of still that makes breathing feel like a choice. Devin didn't blink. He stood there, 17. Posture easy, eyes ancient, the red and gold banners reading honor, disciplinary tradition hanging above them like silent witnesses. Vance towered, broad shoulders in a black silk GI with gilt stitching, the golden dragon trophy hugged beneath one arm, knuckles whitening around its base. This arena belongs to those who honor true lineage, he announced, pitching his voice to carry to the front rows. Not outsiders who disrespect tradition. Devin's pulse was steady. He could feel it the way a drummer feels time. Not rushing, not dragging. I've waited 5 years for this moment, Mr. Mercer, he said, voice even, almost soft, and somehow it reached every ear in the converted theater. I wouldn't be anywhere else. A couple of gasps. A judge shifted in his chair. No one moved to intervene. Then I'll teach you a permanent lesson about respect. Vance jabbed 2 fingers into Devin's sternum. A punctuating beat meant to bruise pride more than flesh. Devin didn't step back. He nodded, measured, maddening. For a heartbeat, something skittered across Vance's face, a tiny fracture in the porcelain confidence. The Golden Dragon tournament had the weight of a cathedral. The building used to be one. The ceiling groined and high, the walls dressed in carved dragons coiled up century-old columns. The floor smelled like polished wood and ceremonial incense. Calligraphy banners draped from the rafters in precise symmetry. Outside, posters promised greatness. Inside, tradition had all the stage lighting. Earlier, Vance's pre-tournament demonstration had earned a standing ovation. His forms were flawless and theatrical, a storm wrapped in silk. 5 championship medals gleamed on the display table, a neat little solar system orbiting his legend. He'd closed his demo with that signature humility he wore like a tailored coat. The true art requires lifelong dedication to authentic transmission, he had told the crowd. I'm merely a vessel for what our forebears entrusted to us. Thunderous applause. The kind of applause that tells a man his story is safe. Devin's entrance stirred no weather. He came through a side door with a frayed-strap gym bag stamped with a Taylor Community Center, East Side logo. No coach trailing notes. No teammates slapping backs. He registered quietly at the table. Director Alan Park frowned at the form. Taylor Community Center, he read. I'm not familiar with this dojo. It's not a dojo, sir, Devin said, polite, unbent. It's a rec center in East Side. East Side, Park repeated, sharing a look with his assistant like the words were a smudge he couldn't wipe off the page. I've met all qualifying requirements, Devin added, still soft. Regional semifinals, 3rd or higher. The stamp landed with reluctant authority. On his way to the prep area, Devin's plastic water bottle rolled off the bench. Vance, gliding past with his entourage, clipped it with a foot. The bottle spun, spilling a shining ribbon across the wood. Vance didn't look down. Careful where you step, boy, he murmured, lips barely moving. Wouldn't want you to soil the floor. Devin crouched, wiped the water with a spare towel, movements as economical as a metronome. My father always said, he replied without looking up, the measure of a martial artist is how he treats those he thinks are beneath him. For an instant, Vance's eyes narrowed, annoyance or surprise at being answered in a tone that didn't bend. Then the practiced smile reappeared. He drifted away, students orbiting like obedient moons. From his bag, Devin took out a small, worn photograph. A younger man in a plain white GI, a modest trophy in his grip, a date stamped in the corner, 20 years ago. James Taylor, chin high, eyes like quiet flint. Devin's thumb traced the edge. Then the photo slipped back into the inner pocket. A relic returned to its reliquary. Bracket assignments went up, the migration to the board swift and noisy. Whispers hopped row to row. They tossed the newcomer into the champions division. With that record, is out in the first round. Devin scanned the printout, registering the shape of his path. Every opponent a second-degree black belt or better. Resumes like resumes love to be. heavy with placement medals. He nodded once, the kind of nod that says, noted, not negotiated. On the dais, Master Hiro Tanaka watched him. Tanaka's face carried the map of decades in the art, creases that looked carved more than wrinkled. His eyes narrowed a fraction, head tilting, like catching a scent from a memory he hadn't finished with. The bracket is final, Director Park announced, sensing the electric hum of opinion. Tradition dictates respect for the judge's decisions. Devon bowed toward the voice and walked to his prep corner. The preliminary match didn't arrive with trumpet blasts. His opponent, a stocky regionals regular, came in hot, the loose swagger of a man clocking an easy paycheck. The ref's hand cut the air. Begin. Devon moved like a truth you can't argue with. Not flashy, not timid, efficient. His blocks met strikes at the inevitable moment. Not early, not late. His counters were fundamentals, performed at a level that made fundamentals look like secrets. What he didn't do mattered most. No wasted steps, no flex for the crowd, no story on his face. Strange, a coach muttered to no one. His perfecting basics, but holding back. By halfway, Devon led by a clean margin. The stocky fighter's breath thickened. His attacks grew urgent, then sloppy. Devon's rhythm didn't budge. The sound of contact, clean, controlled, became its own metronome. People who'd been scrolling their phones put them down. Then glass shattered, figuratively, when Vance Mercer strode to the mat's edge and lifted a hand. "Stop," he commanded. The referee turned, startled. "Excuse me, Champion Mercer. As head of the tournament's traditions committee, I have the right to question improper participation." Vance stepped onto the mat. It was a breach. No one stopped him. He pointed at Devon. "This boy claims a community center, yet is performing protected lineage material." Director Park hustled over. "Champion, the match is in progress." "This is about integrity," Vance said louder, facing the audience without appearing to. "Where did you learn these forms? Who is your master?" Devon lowered his guard, hands at his sides. "Taylor Community Center," he said. "East Side. Volunteers teach. My father, before he passed." Vance's smile sharpened. "Self-taught by a hobbyist, and you presume to stand in the Golden Dragon." He half-turned to the crowd. "This tournament honors centuries of transmitted knowledge, not weekend warriors playing karate in gymnasiums." A few laughs. Finn, eager to belong to the winning side. Vance closed the distance without permission and seized Devon's shoulders, twisting him into a stance. "Your tiger guard is wrong. This is the proper position." "Champion Mercer," Master Tanaka said, rising. "This is preservation," Vance cut in. "Or shall we dilute our ancestors to flatter counterfeits?" His fingers bit through GI fabric. He released with a small shove, the kind that calls itself a correction. Perhaps a demonstration would educate everyone. He smiled. "Unless our newcomer fears a proper lesson." Devon finally met his eyes, calm, not cold. "Perhaps Mr. Mercer would prefer to test my skills himself, rather than dismissing them." That landed like a bell struck once and let ring. "You want a lesson from the master?" Vance laughed, sharp as a blade. "In front of everyone, your funeral." "I would be honored," Devon said. Murmurs surged, half thrill, half dread. The air shifted from sport to spectacle to something heavier, a reckoning dressed like entertainment. Director Park, flanked by judges, cleared his throat. "An unusual, but not unprecedented situation," he declared with forced neutrality. Champion Mercer invoked the tradition of the honor match. A lacquered box appeared, mother of pearl gleaming. Park lifted an aged scroll with priestly care. "Per custom, both parties must understand the stakes." "The loser kneels," Vance recited, voice carrying. "Acknowledges inferior understanding, relinquishes titles and claims to lineage." He let the silence gather, and then added, silky and cruel, "And when I win, the boy admits false pretense and is barred from recognized tournaments. To protect our art." Gasps, real ones. "I accept," Devon said, immediately. Something in Vance flinched, small, involuntary. The brush pens came out. Signatures bloomed in black ink. right thumbs pressed to pads, prints sealed beside names. Modern symbolism for an ancient blood oath. The honor match concludes tomorrow. Before the finals, Park announced, rolling the scroll. All will witness. Vance leaned close as the crowd dispersed. Do you understand what you signed, boy? Your future, your dignity. Devin's gaze didn't waver. I understand exactly what my father lost to you 20 years ago. Vance's expression flickered, then shut. He turned away to his orbiting admirers. In the stands, Master Hero Tanaka watched Devin the way you watch a candle in wind. Not for the flame, but for the air itself. He approached later, voice low. There is honor in respect, he said, and honor in truth. Tomorrow you must choose which one you will defend. Devin bowed. The theater swallowed the last of the crowd noise. The banners above stayed exactly where they'd always been. The difference now was everyone finally looked at them. The preliminary bout hadn't even finished when the air cracked. Stop this nonsense. Vance Mercer's voice thundered across the hall. The referee froze mid-gesture. The stocky competitor looked back and forth, suddenly unwilling to move another inch. The audience buzzed uneasily. Everyone knew what it meant for the reigning champion to step onto the mat. Champion Mercer, Director Alan Park said carefully, hustling forward, the match is in progress. Vance didn't break stride. He crossed the red boundary line with theatrical precision, as though claiming the floor itself. As head of the tournament's traditions committee, I reserve the right to intervene. He gestured at Devin Taylor. This boy is using techniques far beyond his station. He claims training from some community gym, yet his movements reek of stolen lineage. The word stolen rippled like gasoline across the rows. Some nodded reflexively, others frowned, but no one spoke. Devin lowered his guard. His hands dropped to his sides. His voice carried, calm, but iron in its steadiness. Taylor Community Center, East Side. Volunteers teach there. My father before he passed. Volunteers. Vance scoffed, circling like a predator in front of prey. So, not a master, not a recognized line, not a single credential in sight. He raised his voice for the crowd, and yet he dazed to enter the Golden Dragon, the most sacred tradition in our country's martial arts. A laugh scattered from somewhere in the back. A nervous, ugly sound. Vance seized Devin by the shoulders, twisting him into a stance. Look at this, he said, forcing Devin's arms into position. Wrong. Weak. Incomplete. This is the proper tiger guard. His fingers dug hard enough to bruise. From the judge's table, Master Hero Tanaka stood, the scrape of his chair sharp as a blade. Champion Mercer. This is preservation. Vance cut him off, still holding Devin. Would you have us dilute the sacred forms so anyone off the street can mimic them? He shoved Devin back a step. Devin didn't stumble. He simply returned to neutral stance, eyes steady. Perhaps Mr. Mercer would prefer to test my skills himself rather than lecture the audience about them. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't defiant. It was certain. The crowd reacted like a match had been struck. Some cheered at the audacity. Others shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Vance's face flickered. Then the smile snapped back on. You want a lesson from the master himself. In front of everyone. He laughed, sharp, biting. Your funeral, boy. I would be honored, Devin said. Director Park ran a hand down his face, muttering under his breath, before stepping forward. An unusual, but not unprecedented situation, he announced, voice amplified for the restless hall. Champion Mercer has invoked the tradition of the honor match. Gasps this time. Real ones. The kind you hear when the stakes jump from sport to destiny. An assistant appeared, carrying a lacquered box inlaid with mother of pearl. Park opened it with reverence, drawing out an ancient scroll edged in silk. The parchment was brittle, stained by centuries of hands and blood. Per tradition, Park intoned, unrolling the scroll with delicate precision. The honor match is more than spectacle. It is a binding oath to the ART's oldest customs. He read slowly, clearly, like scripture. When questions of legitimacy arise, two practitioners may resolve the matter through formal combat. The loser kneels before the victor, acknowledges inferior understanding, and relinquishes all claims to lineage. The hall hushed. Everyone knew the words, but spoken aloud, under dragon-carved rafters, they became heavy enough to bend the air. "That is correct," Vance Mercer said loudly. Then he added, lips curling, with one addition. "When I win, the boy admits his false pretense and agrees never again to compete in any recognized tournament." A collective intake of breath swept the seats. Even by the brutal standards of honor matches, it was extreme. Lifetime exile. Permanent silencing. Champion Mercer, Director Park hesitated. "To protect the integrity of our traditions," Vance said, each syllable deliberate. All eyes turned to Devon, waiting for him to waver, to stall, to protest. But he didn't. His reply was immediate. "I accept." No pause. No negotiation. The reaction wasn't applause. It was shock. A ripple of disbelief broke through the audience. Even Vance's smile faltered for half a second, the mask slipping before he dragged it back into place. Park cleared his throat. Then, by tradition, the scroll must be signed. 2 brush pens were produced. Vance signed first, his strokes bold, theatrical. Devon followed, unhurried, controlled, ink flowing in measured lines. "Thumbprints," Park said, producing the small red ink pad. Vance pressed his thumb down hard, leaving a blotch as aggressive as his stance. Devon pressed his own lightly, a clean, perfect mark. "Historically, this was blood," Park reminded the crowd. "The thumbprint still symbolizes the oath." The scroll was rolled, placed back into the lacquered box. "The honor match will conclude tomorrow, before the championship finals," Park declared. "All will witness." The crowd erupted in whispers. Some cheered for tradition. Others shook their heads at cruelty. As people dispersed, Vance leaned close enough that only Devon could hear. "Do you understand what you've signed away, boy? Your future, your dignity. Tomorrow, you'll crawl." Devon met his stare without blinking. "Tomorrow, Mr. Mercer, is about more than me. It's about the truth my father carried into this arena 20 years ago." Vance stiffened, caught off guard. Something flickered across his face, recognition, memory, before he turned on his heel, his entourage following like shadows. From the judge's table, Master Hiro Tanaka watched Devon with hawk eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply stood longer than anyone else, as if silently measuring the boy against something, or someone, long gone. The contract was sealed, and the countdown had begun. The tournament hall emptied out in a restless blur of whispers and sidelong glances. By the time the ceremonial drums faded, Devon Taylor found himself alone in the preparation room. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a cold hum, throwing hard-edged shadows against the tiled floor. He sat cross-legged in the corner, his breathing slow, measured, each inhale filling his chest like it was drawing not air, but resolve. From his frayed gym bag, he pulled out the same worn photograph he had carried for years. It showed a younger man in a simple GI, posture sharp as a blade, a modest trophy clasped in his hands. The man's jawline, his eyes, the way he stood, it was all Devon, just 20 years older. The date stamped in the corner told the story, Golden Dragon Tournament, 20 years earlier. His father, James Taylor. Devon traced the photo's edges with his thumb as memories surfaced like bubbles rising through still water. James Taylor hadn't been a proper martial artist, not in the eyes of the establishment. He didn't belong to an elite dojo with political clout. He wasn't sponsored by wealthy patrons. He didn't have glossy promotional posters announcing his lineage. He was self-taught first, a community warrior later, refining his skills through decades of study, sweat, and an obsessive devotion to fundamentals. By the time he entered the Golden Dragon, he was a rising star, not in magazines, but in whispers. The East Side Fighter, people called him. A man who moved like water, powerful but adaptable. He'd shocked regional competitions with flawless timing and a mastery of basics so perfect they looked transcendent. For the first time, it seemed like someone outside the proper channels might break through. That year, James reached the semifinals, and his opponent was a young, hungry fighter named Vance Mercer. Devin closed his eyes and heard the stories his father had told over late-night practices in their tiny apartment. He was aggressive, James had said once, his voice more memory than sound. Not disciplined, but powerful. And he knew the referees were on his side. I blocked clean. They called me for excessive force. I scored a point. They erased it. He struck pressure points, illegal, and they looked away. It wasn't just the defeat that broke James. It was the aftermath. The whispers that he didn't belong. The accusations that his training was improper, unrecognized, illegitimate. That he had stolen techniques he could not have learned honestly. Overnight, the doors that had begun to open slammed shut. Students drifted away. Parents didn't want their children training under a man tainted by controversy. The dojo emptied. The recognition that should have been his slipped into smoke. James never stopped teaching, but he did it at a different place, a rundown community center on East Side. There, he taught not for trophies, but for truth. Kids who had nowhere else to go found not just martial arts, but discipline, focus, and dignity in his classes. You don't measure a martial artist by medals, James would tell the students, voice steady despite the weight he carried. You measure them by how they live. But behind closed doors, the humiliation lingered. Depression seeped into him. The constant grind of poverty, the whispers of failure, the sting of betrayal from a system that valued politics over principles. It wore him down. His health frayed, his spirit broke piece by piece. When Devin was 15, James Taylor lay in a hospital bed, lungs rattling like broken drums. Devin sat at his side, gripping his hand. "Don't let them decide your worth, son," James whispered, eyes clouded but fierce. "The true art endures. Even when men twist it, even when they bury it, it survives. Promise me you'll carry it forward. Promise me you'll show them the truth." Devin's voice shook, but he spoke the words that became a vow. "I promise, Dad." 3 days later, James Taylor was gone. Devin opened his eyes now, back in the humming locker room. He reached into a hidden compartment of his bag and pulled out something more fragile than the photograph. A small leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age, its pages yellowed and brittle. Inside, in faded ink and hand-drawn illustrations, was the original manuscript of the Shadow Palm lineage, the pure, unbroken tradition of their art. It had been entrusted to James Taylor by a master who believed in him, and through him, passed to Devin. Unlike the commercialized forms Vance Mercer flaunted, this was the real thing. Breathing patterns, internal energy cultivation, the invisible principles that turned simple movements into transcendent ones. Techniques so refined, they weren't flashy enough for crowds, but unshakable in their truth. After his father's death, Devin had sought out one of the last guardians of that manuscript, Master Sion Zhang, an elderly teacher who had gone into seclusion in the mountains, disillusioned with the politics of modern martial arts. For 2 years, Devin trained with him in silence and discipline. No cameras, no trophies, just the manuscript, his body, and the fire of a promise. Now, in this locker room, he began moving through one of the breathing sequences, subtle hand motions, imperceptible to the untrained eye, yet carrying the rhythm of an ancient lineage. The door creaked. Devin froze. Standing in the doorway, his back straight despite his age, was Master Hiro Tanaka. His eyes were sharp, scanning Devin's movements with recognition that seemed to pierce decades. "I thought so," Tanaka murmured. His voice was low, but sure. "The shadow palm breathing pattern. I have not seen it in 20 years. Devin carefully closed the manuscript and set it aside. "You knew my father." Tanaka stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His face, carved with time, softened for a brief moment. "I judged that match. I watched him stand alone against Mercer. I voted for him, but I was outnumbered." His hands folded behind his back. Politics won that day, not truth. Devin's jaw tightened. "My father died believing he had failed." Tanaka shook his head slowly. "No, he preserved something Mercer never could. And now, I see it in you." He paused, then added, "But be careful, young one. Tomorrow, Mercer will fight not for victory, but for survival. He knows what exposure means. Devon bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the warning. Tanaka lingered for a moment longer. True mastery reveals itself, even to those who refuse to see. Tomorrow, you will not just fight Mercer. You will fight 20 years of lies. He turned and left, the door shutting quietly behind him. Devon exhaled, steady, controlled. He picked up the photograph one more time, brushing his thumb across his father's face. First step done, Dad, he whispered. Tomorrow, I finish it. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but Devon heard something else beneath them, the echo of his father's promise, alive and waiting in his chest. The honor match wasn't about a title anymore. It was about a lineage, a vow, and a truth that could no longer be buried. By noon the next day, the Golden Dragon Theater was overflowing. Word of the honor match had spread beyond the martial arts community. People who hadn't stepped foot in a dojo in their lives pushed their way inside, whispering about the boy from East Side who dared to face champion Vance Mercer. Extra chairs had been dragged into the aisles. Still, crowds stood 3 deep against the carved columns. The hall smelled of incense and anticipation. On every banner overhead, the words stared down in bold calligraphy. Honor, discipline, and tradition. A low drum rolled 3 times, shaking the silence into place. Director Alan Park walked to the center of the mat with a solemnity usually reserved for funerals. His voice carried through the amplifiers, though he barely raised it. Today we observe the ancient rite of the honor match. 2 practitioners stand not for themselves, but for the integrity of our art. What we witness is binding. The audience leaned forward, breaths caught. From a northern entrance, champion Vance Mercer. The doors opened, and Vance emerged like royalty. He wore a black silk GI with gold dragons curling across its hems, the fabric shimmering under the stage lights. Across his chest lay a sash embroidered with 5 medallions, each one a championship won under these very rafters. Behind him came 6 senior students, each carrying a traditional weapon of their lineage: staff, twin sabers, chain whip, spear, fan, and halberd. It was spectacle, pure theater, designed to remind everyone of his dominance. He stepped onto the mat and began his formal entry ritual. His movements were sharp, explosive, every kick cracking through the air like a whip, every strike landing with audible force. He leapt into a spinning split kick, landed without a tremor, and flowed into the tiger crane stance that had become his signature. The crowd roared. Applause thundered against the walls. People stood, clapping until their palms turned red. Director Park's voice rang out like a proclamation. Champion Mercer honors us with a Dragon Tiger entry form, a display of strength, precision, and external mastery. Vance bowed deeply toward the judges. Then in 4 directions of the hall, his humility practiced but hollow, every gesture calculated for optics. Finally, he turned to face the southern entrance, where the boy from East Side would appear. His smirk was already in place. From the southern entrance, Devon Taylor. The doors creaked open. Devon walked in alone. No entourage, no banners. His GI was plain white, unmarked, with no belt of rank. His gym bag had been left behind. His hands were empty. He paused just inside the boundary ropes, bowed once, low, deliberate, to the judges' panel, then stepped forward to the center line. His movements weren't flashy. They were quiet, economical, like a man who had already rehearsed every step in his mind and found them sufficient. Polite applause scattered across the room, a spattering of hesitant claps. Some spectators chuckled under their breath. He didn't even warm up, one man said too loudly. Another whispered, "He looks like he bought that GI yesterday." But at the judges' table, Master Hiro Tanaka leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on Devon's calm breathing. Where others saw nothing, Tanaka saw balance, a body aligned with itself, as if the boy was already in motion without moving. Director Park raised his hand again. As tradition requires, both practitioners will first demonstrate their understanding of the art. Vance stepped forward immediately. "I will perform the 5-element sequence," he declared, a form passed down through 28 generations of recognized masters. He launched into the kata with hurricane force. His fists cracked through the air, his kicks snapped like rifle fire, His jumps were high, his spins flawless. At the crescendo, he slammed down with a double palm strike so loud it rattled the floorboards. His key shouts echoed, bouncing against the vaulted ceiling. The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers. They whistled, clapped, shouted his name. This was what they came for, fireworks. When he finished, Vance bowed, chest heaving just slightly, eyes cutting toward Devin with a gleam that said, "Follow that." "Devin Taylor," Director Park announced, "your demonstration." Devin stepped forward. He bowed, and then he performed the very first form taught to beginners. No leaps, no spins, no shouts, just stances, blocks, strikes, the most elementary sequence. But each one was perfect. Transitions seamless. Every breath timed with movement. Each strike landed not with noise, but with clarity, as though space itself bent to make room for the technique. The whole didn't know what to do with it. Some laughed outright. Others frowned, trying to place the strange feeling in their gut. It wasn't showmanship. It wasn't spectacle. But it felt right. "Is he mocking the tradition?" someone hissed. But Tanaka's eyes narrowed. He recognized what the crowd couldn't. The boys' movements weren't simple. They were stripped down. Phew. The kind of basics only mastered after years of tearing away all excess. When Devin finished, he bowed again and stepped back. Director Park cleared his throat. "The honor match will proceed in 3 rounds, judged by points or by demonstration of superior understanding. May the art itself decide." Both fighters walked to their marks. Vance rolled his shoulders, his muscles gleaming under the lights. He smiled like a wolf about to eat. Devin stood still, arms loose at his sides, breathing even. The referee raised his hand. "Begin." The crowd leaned forward as one, not yet knowing they were about to witness the shattering of an illusion 20 years in the making. The referee's hand cut down. "Begin." Vance Mercer exploded forward like a storm breaking loose. His strikes came fast, a blur of fists and kicks, honed from years of repetition, powered by muscle and arrogance in equal measure. Devin Taylor didn't meet them with power. He didn't even seem to fight. He shifted, inches at a time, subtle weight transfers, pivots that let the storm pass a fraction wide. A fist grazed air. A kick whistled just short of fabric. To most of the audience, it looked like chance. To trained eyes, it was perfection. For a full 30 seconds, Vance attacked relentlessly, and Devin simply wasn't there. Murmurs rippled across the theater. Some spectators frowned. Others leaned forward, confused. The boy wasn't hitting back. He wasn't grandstanding. He was just untouchable. "Stop mocking me." Vance barked mid-combination, his teeth bared. His tiger crane strikes slashed the air. His knees thundered. His footwork pounded the mat. And still, Devin's economy of movement made him look like he was barely trying. When he finally countered, it wasn't with flourish. It was a single, clean palm block. So precise, it redirected Vance's strike and forced the champion to overextend, just slightly. But that slight imbalance was enough. The flaw in Vance's celebrated form became visible, a crack in the armor no one had dared to point out before. From the judge's table, Master Hiro Tanaka's eyebrow lifted a fraction. He had seen it. The round ended with no decisive points, but the crowd was restless. This wasn't the dominance they had expected. Round 2. This time, Vance circled. He wasn't smiling anymore. His eyes narrowed, calculating. He tried patience, probing Devin's defenses with feints, testing for weakness. Devin adjusted in rhythm. Every pivot, every shift as natural as breathing. He still hadn't unleashed a single offensive sequence. Yet his defense looked less like reaction and more like inevitability. Then it happened. Devin left a faint opening, a subtle tilt of weight, a millisecond lapse in coverage. It was bait. Vance lunged, committing fully, teeth flashing in anticipation. Devin's counter was devastating in its simplicity. He redirected with a basic palm strike, flowing with Vance's own momentum, sending him stumbling. For the first time, the 5-time champion nearly lost his footing in front of a live audience. Gasps rippled. Coaches muttered. The front rows leaned in. Vance recovered quickly, but his mask cracked. His next attacks were sharper, but dirtier. Disguised finger strikes toward the eyes, joint locks disguised as throws, sweeps aimed to injure. He was playing outside the rules now, desperate to remind the crowd of his power. Devon adapted seamlessly. He blocked without escalation, parried without malice. And now, he began adding light counters, simple strikes, textbook kicks, perfectly timed. Not flashy, but each one landed clean, undeniable. By the final minute of the round, the mood of the entire theater had shifted. Spectators who had laughed at Devon's simple demonstration now watched in silence, realizing they were seeing something extraordinary. The bell signaled the end of round 2. Vance Mercer was sweating, breathing hard. His silk GI clung dark with moisture. Devon, he stood still, chest rising and falling with the same calm rhythm as when he walked in. The crowd had come to see a coronation. They were witnessing an unraveling. Round 3. Vance abandoned restraint. His movements became raw, fueled by force, not form. He attacked like a man fighting for survival, hurling every ounce of muscle, every ounce of anger. The rules disintegrated. He grabbed Devon's GI, tried to trap his fingers, even disguised a strike to the throat. Still, Devon didn't escalate. He stayed rooted in simplicity, in truth. His defenses were flawless, his counters minimal. His breathing remained steady. He looked less like a fighter and more like a mirror, reflecting Vance's fury back at him. The crowd was dead silent. No cheers, no laughter, just the sound of fists colliding with empty air, of Vance's breath coming ragged, of Devon's feet whispering against the mat. And then Vance set up for it. His signature, the dragon's tail, the technique that had won him 3 championships, marketed as unblockable. A feint one way, then a whipping circular strike with every ounce of his body behind it. It was devastating when it landed. It always landed. Spectators straightened in their seats. Students from Vance's dojo whispered, "Here it comes." The boys finished. Vance's eyes burned with finality as he launched into the technique. And then Devon moved. Not much. Barely at all. A small shift, so slight it seemed invisible to most. But when the strike came, Devon's hand traced a precise arc, intercepting the flow of Vance's energy. Not his body, not the strike, but the path of force itself. It was the shadow palm counter, not the watered-down version taught in commercial schools. The original, from the manuscript. The result was instantaneous. Vance's force had nowhere to go. His own momentum reversed against him. His balance shattered. His eyes widened in disbelief, the realization dawning even before his body reacted. "That technique," he gasped, staggering. "It can't be." The audience erupted, half in confusion, half in shock. They didn't understand what they'd seen, but they felt it. Something deeper than skill had just been revealed. Devon held his stance, the ending posture illustrated in the ancient texts. His hands steady, his breathing unbroken. For a moment, Vance just stared. The truth etched across his face. He knew what he had felt. He knew what it meant. Then, desperation overcame recognition. With a roar of denial, Vance hurled himself forward in a wild, illegal strike aimed at Devon's throat. But Devon wasn't there. He shifted aside with minimal effort. Vance's own momentum carried him forward until his knee twisted beneath him. A sharp, sickening pop cracked through the hall. He collapsed to the mat. Clutching his leg, the roar turned into a cry of pain. The fight was over. Not because Devon struck him down, but because Vance Mercer had destroyed himself, unable to accept the truth staring him in the face. Master Hiro Tanaka rose from his seat. No words were necessary. Every soul in the hall understood what they had witnessed. The dragon had cracked, and in the silence that followed, a new truth stepped forward, embodied in the calm stance of Devon Taylor. The silence after Vance Mercer's collapse was suffocating. 500 people held their breath as the once untouchable champion clutched his knee, face twisted in pain, pride shattering louder than the joint that betrayed him. Sweat ran down his temples, soaking the dragon embroidery of his GI. For the first time in his career, Vance Mercer wasn't the center of applause. He was the center of pity. Director Alan Park stepped forward, scroll of the honor match clutched in his hands like a priest bearing scripture. His voice was careful, formal, but tinged with unease. According to tradition, the honor match has concluded. The formal ceremony of recognition must now take place. The words were daggers. Everyone knew what came next. By his own terms, Vance was bound to kneel before his opponent, admit inferiority, relinquish titles, and surrender all claims to lineage. He had written his own humiliation into the contract. On the mat, Vance stayed frozen, one hand gripping his knee, the other a fist against the floor. His face contorted, not just with pain, but with refusal. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't bring himself to bend. The crowd stirred uncomfortably. Some whispered, others looked away. His own students lowered their eyes, unwilling to watch their master crumble. The silence stretched, heavy as a tomb. And then Devin Taylor stepped forward. Calm, unshaken, his white GI still crisp, his breath still even. His voice carried without effort. "Before we continue," he said, bowing to the judge's table, "I should properly introduce myself. My name is Devin Taylor. I am the son of Master James Taylor." The name landed like thunder. A collective murmur surged through the theater. Older practitioners turned to one another, faces pale with recognition. The younger ones leaned in, whispering, "James Taylor, wasn't he the one?" Devin reached into his GI and withdrew a folded parchment. Edges yellowed, ink faded with time. He handed it to Director Park. "This is the original certificate of lineage," he explained, his voice clear and steady. "Signed by Grandmaster Jing, acknowledging my father as the 19th generation heir of the authentic Shadow Palm tradition." Park's hands trembled slightly as he passed the document to Master Hiro Tanaka, who examined the signature and seals with reverent care. His eyes flicked up, meeting Devin's with the weight of recognition. But Devin wasn't finished. From the sidelines, a student of the Taylor Community Center stepped forward, holding a small leather-bound book. Devin accepted it, then placed it on the lacquered table before the judges. "This," he said, opening the pages for all to see, "is the original manuscript of Shadow Palm. The techniques you witness today are not imitations. They are the art in its purest form, preserved as my father taught me. What Champion Mercer has paraded for years is only a fragment." The audience gasped. Judges leaned forward, straining to see the fragile pages inked with ancient diagrams. On the mat, Vance Mercer's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but for once, no words came. "Impossible," someone whispered from the crowd. But Master Tanaka's voice silenced the room. "This manuscript is authentic," he declared, his tone heavy with certainty. "I have studied its descriptions in secret archives. I never thought to see it again." He bowed deeply toward Devin. "The council recognizes Devin Taylor as the legitimate heir of Shadow Palm." The words cracked through the hall like a gavel. Vance's students gasped. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked at their master as though seeing him for the first time. Finally, Vance broke. His voice came hoarse, trembling. "I knew," he admitted, eyes locked on the manuscript. "I knew 20 years ago, when I fought your father. I felt it in his movement. His technique was deeper than mine, more real." His lips curled in anguish. "But if I admitted it, everything I built, my reputation, my titles, my school, it would all collapse." He bowed his head, shame flooding his features. "So I lied. I accused him. I stole his honor. And I carried that lie for 2 decades. Gasps echoed again, sharper this time. The confession was not just personal. It was public execution. With trembling hands, Vance reached for the medals draped across his chest. One by one, he unclasped them, letting them fall to the mat with metallic thuds that echoed like gongs. Finally, from inside his GI, he pulled a small tarnished medal. Its engraving bore the name James Taylor. "This belonged to your father," Vance said, voice breaking. "I took it after his disqualification. I told myself it was a trophy, but it was guilt I carried all these years. It should return to its rightful heir." Devin accepted the medal, his face momentarily breaking, grief flickering, pride shining through. He bowed his head once, then regained his calm. Director Park looked down at the honor match scroll still in his hands. "Champion Mercer," he said carefully, "tradition requires you to kneel before the victor and acknowledge defeat." For a moment, it seemed Vance would resist. His fists trembled, his jaw clenched. Then, slowly, painfully, he lowered himself onto his good knee, the injured one buckling under his weight. His head bowed, his voice low, ragged. "I acknowledge. My understanding was inferior. My lineage claims false." The crowd erupted, not in applause, not yet, but in gasps and murmurs. They had just witnessed something no one thought possible. Vance Mercer, the invincible dragon, kneeling. Devin, instead of reveling in the moment, stepped forward and extended his hand. "Rise," he said simply. Vance looked up, stunned. The hand trembled in front of him, but it was steady, unwavering. After a long hesitation, he accepted it. Devin helped him stand, the gesture transforming humiliation into something else. The theater held its breath as Devin turned back to the crowd. His voice carried to the farthest rows. "The shadow palm tradition does not belong to bloodlines, medals, or politics. It belongs to truth. My father was denied that truth 20 years ago. Today, it is restored." Master Tanaka stood. His bow to Devin was deep, formal, and absolute. The other judges followed, one by one. The crowd watched history being rewritten in real time. Vance Mercer, stripped of titles, stood beside the boy he had mocked, a hollow figure next to calm certainty. And for the first time in decades, the Golden Dragon banners seemed to mean what they said. Honor, discipline, tradition. Finally, the words had found someone worthy. The Golden Dragon Theater emptied that night, but the story didn't. It walked out with every spectator, whispered across streets, carried on phones, spreading like fire through the martial arts community and beyond. By morning, Devin Taylor's name was on every forum, every dojo's bulletin board, every martial arts podcast. Headlines read, "The Champion Kneels. Lost Manuscript Restored at Golden Dragon. East Side Teen Dismantles Tradition's Gatekeeper." For many, the shock wasn't just in seeing Vance Mercer defeated. It was realizing how much had been built on lies. At the Taylor Community Center the following week, the gym floor creaked under triple the usual weight. Kids in mismatched GAS spilled across the mats. Parents lined the walls, newcomers eager to see the boy who had humbled the invincible champion. Devin didn't make speeches. He didn't bask in glory. He simply taught, just as his father had taught. Fundamentals, patience, breath, balance. The same first form he had performed in front of a laughing audience. Only now, no one laughed. They studied every angle, every transition. Because they knew now, the basics were not simple. They were eternal. And then one day, quietly, Vance Mercer walked through the doors. He didn't wear silk. No entourage trailed him. His knees still braced, his medals gone. For the first time, he came not as a champion, but as a student. The room froze when they saw him. Some parents frowned, protective. Others whispered. But Devin stepped forward calmly, his voice steady. "The doors of this center are open to anyone who comes with sincerity. If you wish to learn, you're welcome here." Vance bowed, deeply, deeper than he had ever bowed in the theater. And for weeks afterward, people saw him kneeling on the mat beside beginners, holding pads for kids half his size, correcting his own basics under Devin's guidance. For some, it was humiliation. For others, it was transformation. For Devin, it was proof even the proudest dragon could learn humility. Months later, at a regional martial arts exhibition, Devin and Vance stepped onto the mat together. Not as rivals, but as partners. Their demonstration was unlike anything the crowd expected. Devin performed the original Shadow Palm sequences with flowing precision. Vance followed, slower, clumsier, but earnest. Each movement a confession, each correction a step toward redemption. When they bowed together at the end, the audience rose in applause. Not for spectacle, for truth. The Shadow Palm manuscript, once hidden in a cracked leather binding, was no longer a secret. Scholars, masters, and practitioners visited the Taylor Community Center to study its pages. It wasn't locked away in glass or hoarded by an elite few. Devin insisted it remain accessible, used as a guide, not an idol. Tradition isn't about trophies or who sits at the top, he told his students. It's about carrying forward the principles that outlast us. Harmony over dominance. Wisdom over power. Character over reputation. Kids nodded. Parents listened. And even Vance Mercer, sitting cross-legged at the edge of the mat, bowed his head in agreement. Years from now, people would still speak of the honor match. Some would call it the day a champion fell. Others would say it was the day truth rose. But for Devin Taylor, it was never about either. It was about a promise made to a dying father, a lineage restored, and a truth too strong to be buried by politics, ego, or time. The camera of memory closes on Devin, bowing to a room full of eager students. Behind him, the banners of the Golden Dragon hang not in a theater of stone, but in the hearts of those learning at a community center floor. Honor, discipline, tradition, not words on a wall. Now, finally, words lived.